I see a face on the screen. Not the first time I've seen him live, actually. I want to tell a quick story. So many of you know we ran our relationship sales mastery event run by our parent company, Tribify, here, I guess, a couple of weeks ago now. And as we were soliciting guest speakers for that event, Tom Schwab sent me an amazing video about really about the topic under discussion. You know, we've been hopefully he'll be coming to talk to us at that event sometime soon. But Tom, it's nice to see your face now really live. And please introduce yourself and tell us about Tom.
Well, Jason, thanks for inviting me here. And once again, I think the entire world needs to go back to military time, because we were supposed to talk at 8 o'clock and I was thinking 8 a.m. and you were thinking 8 p.m. You know, it'd be so much easier. But I'm class of 87 out of the Naval Academy. Yes, Dave Robinson was our most famous classmate there. I got out. I was a naval nuclear surface warfare officer. 92 peace broke out and I got out of the service, took a job.
Which ship do you serve on as a surface nuke?
Yeah, I was USS Abraham Lincoln. At the time, she was the newest and finest aircraft carrier.
Nice.
So got out of the service, took a job in Kalamazoo, Michigan on a snowy February day. I said, I'll take the job, but I'm not dying here. Well, you know, fast forward 30 years or something, it's become home. Did a corporate job with Stryker Corporation, medical devices, both in engineering, then operations, then sales, and then got more into the entrepreneurship thing. I've run a few companies, exited one, sold one, and my current one is called Interview Valet, and we've grown to 35 team members. We get people on podcasts, coaches, authors, brands. And I would say one of the keys to our growth, I want to do a plug for a company here. If you've never heard of VirtForce before, VIRT Force, Kimber Hill is a military spouse down in Jacksonville, Florida. It's amazing. The last 8 people we hired to the team were all remote workers of military spouses. And I was amazed. The unemployment rate and the underemployment rate is just, I think it's 3 to 4 times the national average there. And she's got access to like 50,000 people. And first time we went to hire somebody from her, we were looking for 2. We ended up hiring 6 because they were so good.
Wow. That's, I mean, but you know, this is what I think everybody's learned the hard way, you know, in the last year and change, right? Is that the world changes when you don't have to get on a, you know, subway or get into your car and drive to work, right? I mean, you have employers have options they didn't have before, and so do employees.
Yeah,
Right.
I would say the funniest question I get asked here in Southwest Michigan is, where do you work at? Right. And, you know, 2 things. Well, you know, the first one is I was an engineer, but even an engineer knows don't end the sentence with the preposition. And then, you know, when they say, where do you work at? They mean, what office do you go to? What factory do you go? And I'm like, I work from my home. I live on 6.5 acres here. And as long as you got an internet connection, you can do it. And, you know, when they keep asking questions, I finally just say, did you ever watch Breaking Bad? And they stop asking questions at that point.
Well, 6.5 acres in Kalamazoo. That's like a 1-bedroom apartment in Manhattan, right out there. That's a postage stamp. You got to have at least 50 acres before you're a true property owner, right?
That's true.
Well, listen, Tom, can you talk a little bit? I mean, this is the part. This is the program segment where Willis Croft scratches his own itch. All right. Can you talk a little bit about podcasts and just that whole business model, and tell me a bit more about what you do, right? Because this is, I mean, obviously this is kind of a podcast, and you know, I've got an interest in getting on those things in order to, you know, promote Ring Knocker and whatnot. I mean, this is kind of accidentally become the water that I swim in, right? So can you talk about that a little bit more?
Well, I guess my point of view is that everybody's biggest problem today, I believe is obscurity, right? Pat said it, that they'd hire that retiring naval officer if they only knew about her. And, are the clients that we have access to are not located geographically. The worst business advice I ever got was from my grandfather when I was going away to the academy. I'm 17 years old, having a beer with him. He thought it was my first. And, he told me that, choose carefully who you drink with because you can't choose who you work with. He was a mechanic in a small town. And, now it's, you can choose carefully who you work with too, right? Because you've got access to so many clients if they know about you. And so I think the biggest problem is obscurity. And then that question of, well, how do you get known? And there's a lot of, people saying break through the noise. And the people that are saying that are typically the ones that are selling the megaphones, and just everybody screaming louder and louder. And so to me, it's like, how can you have a conversation? How can you get introduced? And I think podcasts are a great way to do that. It's one of those things where it's less discriminatory, if you will, right? When I hear you, I can't tell what class of the academy you were from, right? What age you were, where you live, anything like that. People really judge you for your content. And it's the only medium that you can listen when you want, where you want, at the speed you want. Studies say 70% of podcasts are listened to sped up. And then you can share it with other people. So I think it's an amazing medium. Gary Vaynerchuk's out there saying everybody should have a podcast. I look at that and go, no, it's a lot of work. Anybody that says doing one is easy has either never done it or never done it well. I always looked at it as, that I'm going to leverage other people's podcasts. And that's what I learned, early on in marketing, and especially with blogs. You can write a blog and have 3 people read it, or you can put a guest post up and, on Forbes, wherever, and you can get, tens of thousands of people. So really, I mean, if you think about it, that same strategy, Jeff came here today, gave great information, and you're working with a great guy there. Bill Watkins, I met him in 2000, I think it was 16, when he and Robert were first launching their podcast there. Amazing guy. And so, they did a lot of that at the beginning, having their own platform, but also using other people's platforms. So podcasting's been here since 2004. I think it's great that it's grown slowly. Right. It's not like, Clubhouse that went up and is coming down now. I think podcasting is going to be here for a long term.
I don't disagree with you. Tell me, Jeff or Tom, when you place somebody on a podcast, typically how big is that audience? I mean, there are a ton of podcasts, right? They can't all have 10 million listeners. So how many people do they typically reach?
So currently there's 2.1 million podcasts out there. Now there's a little asterisk by that. Only 500,000 have posted in the last 30 days. So a lot of them start and die. The average podcast gets 125 episodes or 125 downloads per episode. So you don't want to be on the average one. We typically place people in the top 20% of podcasts, which means at least 1,500 downloads per episode or above. It's much more focused media. So if you look at it, top 1% of all podcasts get 37,000 downloads per episode. And then, you get Rogan and stuff like that, which is probably the, point
skewing the average
0.01%. But the top 1% get at least 37,000 downloads. And, a lot of people will say, well, that's not that much, but, that's 37,000 people that are listening to you the entire time. And, I get nervous when I speak in front of 100 people, live. We had a client that spoke a few years ago at Marlins Stadium in Miami. And I remember the night before he was nervous, and he was speaking to like 20,000 people. It was at Grant Cardone's event. And I said, you've talked to more people than this on a podcast. And he's like, yeah, but at least there they weren't looking back or they couldn't walk out on me.
Yeah, fair enough. And it's interesting too, you mentioned downloads. I mean, I'm sure the dynamics for for a podcast or similar to here, right? I mean, I'm counting, right? Right now I got 15 people on the screen, right? But, there are hundreds or thousands of people who are going to consume, the clips and the full video and whatnot of this thing after the fact, right? So I imagine a lot of your podcasts broadcast live. Isn't that the model? They broadcast live, but then they go up in perpetuity on some platform to be downloaded?
Yeah, it's right now only 5% of them do it live. Most of them
Oh,
record it, they edit it, they put their intro and outro on it, and then they push it
uh-huh.
out there. I think what's really powerful is when you can make them viral, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where one person starts to introduce it to another, right? So if I
Mm-hmm.
heard something today, I'm trying to remember what Jeff said. I'll get 50% of it right when I tell somebody else tomorrow. Whereas if I heard it on a podcast, I could forward it on to you, Jason, and go, hey, I heard this. This guy's really great. Check this out at minute 7 is the
Mm-hmm.
good part. So they're more
Mm-hmm.
shareable that way too.